Did you know that every day archaeologists are rewriting history one discovery at a time? From forgotten peoples to mysterious DNA, these finds from August 2025 are changing what we thought we knew about the past. Ancient DNA studies in Colombia just uncovered evidence of a completely unknown human lineage dating back 6,000 years. Who were these people, and how did their story vanish from history? Most people think that Pompeii was abandoned forever after Vesuvius erupted and buried it in volcanic ash and lava. But here's the twist. New evidence shows that people actually came back and lived there for hundreds of years after. We often picture early medieval England as a fairly homogeneous place when it comes to a population. But cutting-edge genetic research has found traces of West African ancestry buried in local English graves. How did it get there, and what does it mean? Buried for centuries and uncovered today, these are the most jaw-dropping archaeological finds that you need to learn more about. Today, I will be your tour guide on a journey through time, exploring these latest exciting discoveries from around the world, having used my years of experience as an actual archaeologist to carefully research and put together this video of well-sourced and interesting, accurate news about real archaeology. No pseudoscience, clickbait, or artificial intelligence here. This video has been sponsored by Arkeogato Tours, a private customizable Yucatan tour company led by local bilingual archaeologist Zach Lindsay. This isn't your average big corporate ad. Zach is a small business trying to encourage locally led, authentic tours that take you beyond the usual tourist spots. His visitors have a chance to explore serene lagoons, remote villages, lesser-known archaeological sites, and hidden treasures like Valladolid and Bacalar, allowing you to connect with local culture in a way that you never imagined. Zach is a Mayanist, iconographer, and art historian who I have actually interviewed about his work and studies in my Ask an Archaeologist series. So if you're thinking of taking a trip to the jungles of Mexico in the near future, head to his website, link in the description, and check out what he has to offer. All right, everyone, let's dig into the discoveries. We have 8 stories today in our top discoveries segment, presented in chronological order, starting with the one that goes the farthest back in time. Our first story in August comes from near Bogota, the capital of Colombia, where some of the earliest indigenous people who reached South America settled in a plateau known as Altiplano over 11,000 years ago. These groups underwent several cultural shifts before pottery began to be produced there roughly 2,800 years ago. Now, a new DNA study aimed at investigating population movements has uncovered a previously unknown human lineage in the region. The researchers took their samples from the bones and teeth of 21 individuals from 5 different sites in the Altiplano. 7 of these samples came from the 6,000-year-old site of Czechia, and yielded unexpected results when the testing came back showing that the genomes from this site belonged to a relatively small group of hunter-gatherers whose DNA isn't particularly similar to that of indigenous North American groups or to any ancient or modern populations that we know of in Central or South America. This could mean that the Czechia individuals instead derive from the earliest population that spread and differentiated across South America. Even more intriguing is the fact that this population then mysteriously vanished some 4,000 years later. Evidence of their DNA wasn't present in later groups who inhabit the region, meaning that their genes were not passed on, and at some point there was a complete exchange of the population. This study is the first ever publication of ancient human genomes from Colombia, and while it definitely enriches our understanding of the complex population history of this area, it has also raised more questions than it has answered. Further analysis of ancient genomic data from neighboring areas will be pivotal to allowing us to better define the timing and the ancestry sources of human migrations into South America. Our second story this month takes us to Krumlov Forest in Czechia, where deep mining of Jurassic chert which was used to make stone tools and weapons, took place for millennia from the beginning of the Mesolithic until the early Iron Age. This unique site is a significant source of information about the lives of miners from that time. In this discovery, the excavation of mineshaft number 4 yielded 2 female skeletons found at a depth of around 6 meters. One with a newborn placed on her chest, and the other with a dog skull nearby. Radiocarbon dating determined that the human skeletons were roughly 5,300 years old, belonging to the late lineal culture. Ancient DNA revealed that the 2 adults were related and most likely sisters. However, the newborn was not related to either of them. One of the sisters lived to be 30 to 35 years old, was around 148 centimeters tall, and had brown or green eyes. The other was between 35 to 40 years old when she died, and around 146 centimeters tall, and was probably blue-eyed and fair-haired. Stable isotope analysis confirmed that the 2 adult females lived most of their lives in or around the Krumlov forest and consumed a standard diet for this population and region, although they ate slightly more meat than normal. Paleopathological analysis of their bones revealed that they did not have an easy life, as both of them repeatedly experienced illnesses and disproportionately overloaded their spines, especially in the lumbar or lower back sections, by carrying heavy loads and working in a forward bend. One of the skeletons had a poorly healed fracture in her forearm, which strongly suggests that she continued working despite a significant injury. You can only imagine how painful that must have been. This has led the researchers to think that the burials were not ritual offerings within a sacred mine, but of active laborers from the mine. The question remains why the unrelated infant was buried with them and whether they worked voluntarily or were forced to. Whatever the answer, this discovery challenges long-held assumptions about gender roles in prehistoric mining. It also adds to the increasing evidence of ritualized activity, including burials in deep shafts at the site, which has led researchers to reinterpret the forest as a sacred landscape, possibly a symbolic gateway into the underworld. More analysis of the skeletons is planned with further DNA and proteomic analysis, meaning that the story of these women is far from over. Our next story takes us to Shandong province in China. There, at the Neolithic site of Fujia, new research has analyzed ancient DNA alongside archaeological contexts and multiple stable isotopic data from individuals buried in 2 separate cemeteries dating to between 2750 and 2500 BCE. Fujia has been identified as a late Dawanko culture site and covers approximately 37 hectares. Positioned on elevated ground surrounded by lowlands near the sea, it features centrally concentrated residential areas with pottery kilns primarily found on a small elevated area to the west. The 2 separate cemeteries were used over a span of 250 years and encompassed at least 10 generations. Over 500 burials were excavated at these 2 sites, and for the new study, 60 individuals with intact skulls were analyzed. Examination of the mitochondrial, aka maternal, DNA revealed that the individuals buried in the same cemetery had close maternal ancestry and probably a shared matrilineal identity. A high ratio of 60% second to 6th degree kinship connections between the 2 cemeteries also suggests a long-term co-living or coexistence which parallels patterns found in modern matrilineal societies, where individuals maintain a lifelong affiliation and connection with their birth clan and are buried accordingly. This suggests the existence of an early matrilineal community in the Neolithic period, characterized by marriage within the limits of the local community. Archaeobotanical evidence alongside oxygen and nitrogen staple isotope studies further demonstrated that the society was engaged in millet-based farming and animal husbandry, with probable access to marine or freshwater resources as well. This discovery not only fills a significant gap in the archaeogenetic record, but also supports the hypothesis that early matrilineal systems could emerge and persist in communities without strong mechanisms for wealth accumulation. This is a valuable insight into how such structures may have developed under specific social and environmental conditions during the Neolithic transition towards more complex societies in East Asia. Now we head to the Thar Desert in Rajasthan, India, near the border with Pakistan, where archaeologists have uncovered the first confirmed Harappan settlement in the area, expanding the known geographical reach of the Harappan, aka Indus Valley, civilization. The site is named Ratadia Rideri and first came to attention after a local teacher reported finding unusual pottery sherds to the Save Our Heritage Foundation, prompting a formal archaeological investigation. This investigation found the remains of ancient walls, a furnace structure, rectangular bricks, stone mills, bangles made from clay and conch shells, red and wheat-colored pottery, and blades made from chert stone. The site has been dated to between 2600 to 190 BCE, making it a vital link between Rajasthan and Gujarat. This is the first recorded evidence of a Harappan presence in this remote desert region, which suggests that the Harappans were capable of adapting to desert environments, possibly leveraging trade routes and natural resources along the now extinct Saraswati River. The excavation results have now been submitted to journals for publication, while further excavations and studies are expected to yield more valuable insights into the spread and adaptation of one of the world's earliest urban cultures. Our next discovery brings us to southern Bulgaria, where a richly furnished grave of a Thracian warrior has been found during rescue excavations. The grave's occupant was a male who died between the ages of 35 and 40 and was buried with ceremonial gifts, parts of his weaponry, and a wreath placed upon his head, a symbol of honor and elite status in ancient Thracian and Hellenistic culture. Perhaps the most striking aspect was the presence of his horse in the grave, placed onto the left of his body. Above the horse's head were bronze and gilded harness decorations featuring high-relief depictions of mythical figures. One showcases a scene from the Labors of Hercules, crafted with exceptional artistry that speaks to the advanced metallurgical skills of this era. The burial has been dated to the late 2nd century BCE. This discovery and a similarly opulent burial found just 60 meters away has led archaeologists to believe that the area was a significant site for Thracian warriors during the late Hellenistic period, shedding fresh light on ancient burial practices in the region at this time. The findings are currently being prepared for conservation and public display at the Historical Museum in Topolovgrad. Now we go to the Mediterranean coast in Egypt, where the 2,000-year-old remains of a sunken city was lifted out of the sea last month. The site, located on the waters of Abu Qir Bay, may be an extension of the ancient city of Canopus, a prominent center during the Ptolemaic and Roman periods that was one of the principal ports in Egypt for Greek trade before the foundation of Alexandria, which is located nearby. Over centuries, however, earthquakes, shifting geology, and rising sea levels eventually swallowed this city. The underwater ruins include limestone buildings that could have been places of worship, residential spaces, and commercial or industrial structures. Reservoirs and rock-carved ponds for domestic water storage and fish cultivation have also been identified. A merchant ship, stone anchors, and an ancient harbor crane were found at the site of a 125-meter dock, used for small boats until the Byzantine period. And now, modern cranes have slowly hoisted 4 statues from the depths, chosen according to strict criteria, while the rest remain below the waves. The statues that were recovered are incomplete and include a 2.17 meter long beheaded Ptolemaic figure made of granite and the lower half of a Roman nobleman's likeness carved from marble. While most of the artifacts have been left underwater to conserve them, Egypt plans to continue developing Abu Qir Bay into a research and heritage tourism site. Next up, we head to Italy and the ever-excavated site of Pompeii, which has been putting out fresh discoveries what feels like every day sometimes. Unusually, this new revelation dates from after the eruption in 79 CE, which completely engulfed this city and around 10% of its residents. Yes, that is correct. Not everyone died at Pompeii. The eruption was a multi-day event, and those left in the city either couldn't or wouldn't leave in time. So this begs the question of what happened to all those people who escaped. What did they do after the destruction of their home? New evidence giving us insight into this question has now been unearthed at the Insula Meridionalis, the southern quarter of the ancient urban center of Pompeii. This part of the site is currently undergoing a major safety, consolidation, and restoration project, during which new archaeological data was found that suggests that people returned to the site of the disaster and, after a certain point, began to live there among the ruins of the upper floors that had re-emerged from the ash. Life therefore returned to the houses and structures, but the rooms that had originally been on the ground floor now became cellars and hovels where hearths, ovens, and mills were established. Who were these new occupants that returned to the place that they had no way of knowing was safe from more volcanic activity? Well, archaeologists think that some of them may have been survivors who could not afford to start a new life elsewhere and were joined by other settlers and perhaps even people looking to make some quick cash looking for valuables in the city's ruins. This is being called an informal settlement where people lived in precarious conditions without the normal infrastructure and services that we expect of a Roman city. This situation may explain why the Emperor Titus sent 2 ex-consuls to refound Pompeii and Herculaneum. This refounding was not successful, but a form of settlement at the site did continue until the 5th century CE, when, perhaps after another devastating eruption, the area was completely abandoned. Interestingly, evidence that the site was reoccupied had been uncovered previously, but in the rush to access Pompeii's colorful frescoes and still intact homes, these traces of reoccupation were literally removed and often swept away without any documentation. We are lucky that now our methodology and focus has shifted from being monopolized by Pompeii's most infamous event, allowing archaeologists to dig up the parts that have been removed from history, leading to a wider reflection on the archaeological unconscious, on everything that was removed or obliterated or remained hidden in the shadows of other things that were seemingly more important. Our last discovery for August brings us to England, where an ancient DNA study looking at migration patterns in a post-Roman world returned surprising ancestry results for 2 individuals from the 7th century CE. For this month's featured Discovery interview, I spoke to Professor Duncan Sayers, one of the lead researchers of this project. Let's dig in to what he has to say. So welcome to the channel. It is a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you very much, Rachel. It's lovely to join you.
We'll jump right into our first question today, which is, can you please just introduce yourself and your role in this project and discovery?
My name is Professor Duncan Sayers. I'm a professor of archaeology at the University of Lancashire. So I'm the first author for the antiquity paper, and we published the results of the genetics of 2 individuals, primarily focused on this paper on one individual who was a 12 to 14-year-old girl who was found in the 1970s and 80s in a cemetery in East Kent, at Eastry, called Updown, and so she has been called Updown Girl, which is rather a sweet name, I think.
Yeah.
I also quite like the connection to Billy Joel's Uptown Girl as well. I think it gives us a theme tune for the find. Why she's important is that she has 33% of her ancestry comes from West Africa, which places her grandparent as 100% West African. And she's part of 2 discoveries. There's a second one that came out of a bigger genetics project that I was involved with alongside the co-authors for both these papers and various other people, that we published back in 2022. That was a big genetic study where we looked at hundreds of individuals from, I think it's 254 individuals from the east coast of Britain, and then compared them to a comparable number from continental Northern Europe. We were specifically looking at 5th, 6th, 7th century burials to try and work out the impact on the genetics of migration in the early medieval period or not. And the second individual is a boy from Worth and Travis, which is down in Dorset, just outside the Anglo-Saxon cultural zone. And he is also buried at the same time as Updown Girl, which is in the sort of early 7th century. So we're looking at a period of time where we've just seen the reintroduction of Christianity into Britain. And he also has 33% West African ancestry, so it's about 30%. So it's also grandparent, and that's good. And actually, because he's a boy, it's on the Y chromosome, and we therefore know that's a grandfather. Worth Travis was excavated as part of a commercial project by a volunteer group, and then they did the sequencing for the whole cemetery, and that's a separate paper. Lillian Liddell and Cedric Edwards did the genetics for that one. And so we carefully coordinated the publication of those two papers at the same time, because it's such an important discovery that it's worth putting them out there together to have them alongside each other. And what we were trying to do is try and understand where this West African genetics comes from, because in the 7th century we are now several hundred years away from effectively the end of Roman administration in Britain, and so it's not going to be a sort of residual ancestry from the multiculturalism of the sort of elite military populations of Roman Britain. It's got to come through a different route. We've got to find a different way to understand where that is, and that's what we were looking for.
So you said that the Updown Girl originally was excavated in the 70s and 80s. So in that vein, and then this other boy was from a wider genetic study. So like, how exactly?
Studies,
how did the project get started in terms of looking at the Updown Girl? Why did you guys decide to revisit her bones? What was the impetus for that?
So she was part of the wider study as well.
Oh, okay.
So we looked at a whole load of cemeteries going from West Travis, the sort of transept that goes across the south coast of Britain and up the east coast of Britain, all the way up to North Yorkshire and all the way down to Dorset via Kent, if you can imagine the coastline. So all of those cemeteries were incorporated in that, and those two individuals popped out of that sample as particularly interesting because they had this West African ancestry. And we felt that rather than those two being lost in the larger genetic project that was published in Nature, and his focus was really much on migration, we also wanted them to go through a proper peer review process and to be able to put a case where we explain and understand how that genetics comes about. And so really the best way to do that was to write two separate papers.
Was it something that when it came back, was it a surprise? Was it expected? What do you kind of think when you first saw it?
They were unexpected because we were looking for the impact of continental Northern European ancestry on early Anglo-Saxon cemeteries and early medieval cemeteries in, as I said, the south and east coast of Britain, to try and look at whether we could genetically look at migration.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, what we found was these two, and it's just like, well, okay, how do we understand that? That was not what we were looking for at all. It's unexpected, and it tends to point to a much more complicated conversation where this period that we talk about, we think about as a sort of post-Roman period. Roman Empire's over. Britain has had these sort of continental migrants potentially. I mean, the genetics very much points to that strong migration. About 75% of that east coast of Britain, the ancestry is from continental Northern Europe. So really strong migration into Britain in the 5th, 6th, 7th century. So you tend to think of it as sort of focusing on Northern Europe rather than having connections to Southern Europe or North Africa or further afield. Mm-hmm. And these two people make you question those assumptions and make you have to think, okay, so actually what is going on in the 7th century?
And so what are then some of your theories as to how these West African people would have then come to Britain, and what does that say about these individuals that are their descendants?
The timing of this is really important. In this sort of first half of the 7th century is actually really crucial to understanding the pattern. Given that we're also talking about the grandparents of these two individuals, then that 100% West African ancestry is looking like its origin is in the sort of very late 6th or early 7th century. In the mid 6th century, we see the conquest or reconquest of North Africa by Byzantium, and at that point they can open up the trade routes across the Sahara into the sub-Saharan countries. And we know from the historical sources this is because they quite like gold, and there's much more easily accessible gold in West Africa than there is in Turkey. So they're opening up those trade routes again. They're opening up that sort of resource acquisition and movement and a sort of economic flow from West Africa into North Africa into Central Europe in a way that hadn't been done since the Roman Empire. We understand that that's really important, actually, because we can see the traces of that in Anglo-Saxon England, because you can see, for example, and recent studies at Skimby in Lincolnshire have identified from the Zooms evidence, so the sort of proteomics of the animal bones, ivory, bag links that are made from African elephant ivory. So we have artifacts that are associated with Africa. You've got amethyst starting to appear in 7th century graves as well, also coming to that sort of Byzantine connection. And of course you have in Prittlewell and Sutton Hoo, these royal princely burials from 7th century. You have Mediterranean and artifacts that are very much Byzantine. So this connection suddenly becomes very important. You can see that. And what we're adding to it with the discovery of these two individuals is that this is actually not just the movement of artifacts and trade. This is actually the movement of people. And there is a genetic impact as well for these connections and this sort of historical contextualized point in time. And so we have to suddenly consider that early medieval Britain is more multicultural than we had previously expected to be. And that's why it's important. And why we wanted to do these two things together is because Western Travis is outside of the Anglo-Saxon cultural zone. There's only two artifacts in the whole cemetery. One is a stone anchor that was found underneath the head and shoulders of the person, the adult male who the boy was buried with in the same grave, and one is a buckle from a different grave. And so it's well outside of what we've considered sort of early Anglo-Saxon burial practice, outside of the Anglo-Saxon cultural zone, but they're still sort of looking east towards Byzantium. And in that area, in the west coast of Britain, at places like Tintagel, you'll find red slipware, which is Byzantine pottery. So these sort of high status sites, these religious sites, early Christian sites, are very much connected to that idea of sort of late Rome, of that connection to Christianity, that idea of the surviving imperial Roman concept that I think is influencing the 7th century Anglo-Saxon elite sites, and that's the impact that we're seeing there. So they're all sort of focusing on Byzantium as a way of reconnecting and creating a new world based on the idea of ancient Rome and Byzantium and foreign and elite objects.
Yeah, and then this obviously supports, like you said, it supports the idea of that connection, but also adds an extra dimension to it, like you said, which is really, really fascinating.
I would be very surprised now because genetics is getting much more accessible, it's much more integrated into archaeological methodology, and it's much cheaper than it was when we were starting to do this 10 years ago. And so I wouldn't be surprised if we start to see a lot more individuals that have much more diverse and interesting ancestries than we expect. And what's important about these, and actually, I think the migration question is brilliant. It's a really important question. But what genetics can do that we have never been able to do before is identify kinship. So individuals who are related to each other. What's important in these two sites is that in Updown, that girl's maternal ancestors, her aunts and one of her great uncles, are buried next to her. Well, she's buried next to them, maybe. So we can see that she was fully incorporated into that community in a way that you could never possibly have suggested before. Same with Matravis. The boy there, he's not related to anybody buried there, but he's in this double grave. And all of the individuals there, apart from him, are related along 4 maternal family groups. So you can see the organisation of the cemeteries and the communities, and you can see the interconnections of the people. And they're both fully incorporated into those communities in a way that I think gives us this sort of deep contextual understanding of their life. That's the genetics, that's what's happening next. Really, we're going to see these sorts of patterns and these sorts of relationships completely revolutionise the way we think about medieval archaeology, but also other fields and other places and times as well.
Yeah, I just actually last month I interviewed the geneticist who did the Old Kingdom Egyptian genome sequencing.
Yeah.
So that found that it was 80% North African and 20% Mesopotamian.
Wow.
Which is also absolutely fascinating stuff that's happening. Again, she was talking about how, these things are becoming much more cheap and easy to do. They're not taking as long. The technology's progressed. So yeah, I think the things that are coming out of DNA in the next however many decades is going to be really, really fascinating and is going to rewrite what we know about history and our impression of what the makeups of these different populations were in the past.
Yeah, and we just haven't been able to ask these sorts of questions before because the data is not there to support them. You can speculate as much as you like, but actually this is giving us real usable information about relationships and ancestries and giving us more questions, always more questions, but just showing us how much more complicated everything is than we could possibly imagine. It's brilliant.
What an unexpected but intriguing discovery. If you want to know more, you can read the published paper mentioned in this interview for free via the link in the description. That's it for our top discoveries. Now we're moving on to archaeology in news and entertainment. Near the end of August, rather upsetting news broke of intentional damage to an ancient Roman wall in the city of Lincoln in the UK, which is coincidentally where I spent about 9 months living and working on an archaeological project in 2016/17. The damaged wall and gateway were initially constructed in 85 CE as part of the Lower Roman city of Lindum Colonia, and then went on through several phases of building over the course of the next 300 years. This act of vandalism has been likened to that of the sycamore gap tree. However, unlike the tree, this wall is not something that we can regrow. A 45-year-old man was arrested on suspicion of criminal damage and has been released on bail while investigations are ongoing. Plans are also in place to inspect the wall and repair it, although it sadly cannot be completely restored to how it once was. Next, researchers in Japan have confirmed the existence of 2 rare burial artifacts from Daisen Kofun, one of the largest and most mysterious imperial burial mounds in the country. Though long attributed to Emperor Nintoku, Japan's 16th emperor, the true occupant of the Daisen Kofun remains unconfirmed. The Imperial Household Agency strictly controls access, allowing only limited, non-invasive surveys. This secrecy has fueled debate among historians and archaeologists for a very long time. This is the first time physical grave goods from the UNESCO World Heritage Site have been verified, more than 150 years after they were believed to have been lost. The artifacts were traced back to the first documented opening of the burial chamber in 1872, when a landslide exposed part of the mound's front section. The investigation sketched detailed illustrations of the tomb's grave goods before they were reportedly reburied, and for more than a century, these illustrations were considered to be the only record of these items. And it now appears that this was incorrect, as the artifacts were found in the personal collection of the founder of Mitsui & Co., a prominent art patron who had close ties to the leader of the 1872 investigation. The objects were acquired last year by Kokugakuin University from an art dealer, still wrapped in paper with handwritten notes describing their origin. The iron blade was inside a wooden sheath made from Japanese cypress that was encased in a gold-plated copper plate and secured with silver rivets. The blade was broken into 2 sections and was probably ceremonial rather than functional. The armor fragments are made of iron coated with gold rather than the gold-plated copper once assumed from the historical drawings. I don't think it takes much to put 2 and 2 together. These objects were obviously looted from the Kofun in 1872, and I'm sure you all agree that it is great news that they have now been returned to the public domain. The recovered items will be publicly exhibited for the first time at the Sakai City Museum from July 19th to September 7th, alongside their original drawings. Given their rarity, experts predict that they will become central reference points in future Kofun period studies. Lastly, at the end of the month, a trailer dropped for a new Cleopatra documentary by National Geographic. The official synopsis reads, archaeologist Kathleen Martinez is leading a thrilling detective hunt on land and underwater to unearth the final pieces of the puzzle that will unlock the story of Cleopatra's last days. Armed with the latest technology and the unparalleled skills of explorer Bob Ballard, she is guaranteed to make extraordinary discoveries. This could be the find of the century, Cleopatra's lost tomb. The documentary premieres on September 26th, so you can bet my live stream reaction to it will shortly follow. It unsurprisingly features Dr. Zahi Hawass, and Dr. Martinez hasn't given a significant update on her quest for Cleopatra in a few years, so this promises to be an interesting viewing. All right, everyone, time to pack up our finds and hang up our shovels. That's everything for today. Did you like this video? Which story was your favorite? Is there anything important that I missed? Don't forget to comment, like the video, and subscribe to the channel before you leave. If you're feeling extra generous, you can give me a super thanks or go to my Ko-fi page and support me with a small donation. If you're looking for a more tangible return, you can go have a look at my Redbubble shop and get a sticker, t-shirt, hat, or mug with your favorite archaeology slogan that's all been designed by myself. Taking a few seconds to support me in any way you can helps to grow the channel and promotes quality heritage content that is well-sourced, researched, and presented by somebody who actually is experienced in this subject. It shows the algorithm that people are interested in real archaeology. Thank you so much for watching. Stay curious, and I hope to see you on my next adventure inside archaeology.